Would you please turn in your Bibles to John chapter 21. John 21. A few months ago, a lady named Tanya was walking along the beach near her home on the western coast of Australia. And as she was walking, she noticed something sticking out of the sand. And this is what she said. "Well, it just looked like a lovely old bottle, so I picked it up thinking it might look good on my bookcase." And Tanya soon realized that she had uncovered something far more special than that. She picked it up and it was a bottle, and she saw something inside. She dumped the sand out, and out of that bottle came a note tied with a string, the stereotypical message in a bottle. And so she began to pull that out, and it was written all in German, began to research it, and discovered that the note was authentic. It was thrown off of a German sailing ship 130 years ago. The German Navy, for a 70-year time period, was known to keep throwing bottles overboard, thousands of bottles with notes. The captain would write the location, latitude and longitude of where it was. They were testing ocean currents. So these bottles kept getting thrown out. And so Tanya didn't know it at the time, but she discovered back in March, it's the oldest message in a bottle that's ever been found. And but I was picturing this bottle floating around on the ocean for decades, just aimlessly floating. There's a verse in James chapter 1 that talks about a person who doubts in their faith is like somebody who is driven by the wind, floating around on the sea, just tossed by the waves. Well, our last deliverance story message is from John chapter 21, and we're going to somebody who's an aimless drifter. And their aimless drifting brings them to the edge of the sea, and they just want to go back to old times. They've lost their passion, lost their focus, and kind of walked away from whatever intensity they were living with their Christian life. And the tragedy here, it's about Peter. He had it all figured out. He had it going on. And then he lost it. Something happened. Circumstances began to arrange to where he just became a drifter. And it's possible today that there's somebody here that, man, at one time you were excited about God and excited about your faith, and then whatever the circumstances were that conspired, you found yourself drifting. The intensity was gone. The focus was gone. The purpose was gone. And so we're going to look at Peter's story here, this last account, and it's our last one in our Deliverance Stories series. We've been going through the book of John, looking at several conversations Jesus had with different people and the deliverance that came about as a result of his conversation with them. Next week, we're going to start a 4-week series through the month of August on the book of Nehemiah, and we're going to call it We Can Do More Together. God didn't intend for us to live isolated lives as Christians, but he calls us to do more together, and the book of Nehemiah is a classic example of that. So if you have your Bibles, I want to read at the first few verses from chapter 21. I'll start at verse 1. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. And in this way, he showed himself. So verse 1 gives us a little introduction. Jesus came and met with the disciples. Here's how it went down. So verse 2. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee were James and John, and 2 other disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, we're going with you also. They went out and immediately got into the boat, and that night they caught nothing. But when the morning had come, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was him. Then Jesus said to them, children, do you have any food? And they answered him, no. And he said to them, cast your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. So let me set the scene for you. Chapter 21 comes after the resurrection. Now, you would think that the disciples would be on a high, all fired up that the resurrection happened. Jesus is alive. He's not in the grave. He's not on the cross. He's alive. And instead, they find themselves on the shore of the Sea of Galilee trying to figure things out, trying to make sense of it. It says there's 7 of them out of the 11. Judas took his own life. There's 11 disciples. 7 of them are here on the shore. And I picture it, they're just sitting around, skipping rocks out into the water, trying to figure out what's next. Because everything they had done for the last 3 years depended on Jesus being there. Jesus empowering them. It was Jesus' idea to go to the next town, and it was Jesus' idea to do a miracle, and Jesus' idea to preach, and Jesus thought of everything they were supposed to do every day, and now he's not there. After his resurrection, he would show up and leave and come into another scene and leave. And so here they are. It all revolved around Jesus, and he's nowhere to be found. They're going through the big letdown that comes after a big high. Maybe you've been there. Sometimes after youth camp, students come home and they've had this big high at camp, and they come home and it's like all just back to normal. We talk about, we call it re-entry when we go on a mission trip. And our last night of the mission trip, we have conversations about re-entry back into the real world, and your grass will have grown and you're going to have normal problems. And it's be like, I shouldn't have to mow grass. I've just been doing all these cool things on this mission trip. I have to mow the grass. And then some other problem happens, and we start thinking, well, God, why would you let this problem happen? I've been doing all these cool things, and I thought everything was going to just be up and to the right after that and all great, and it's not happening. And so there they sit, 7 of them, around a lake. Of the 7 who are there, previously 4 had been fishermen. So some of them weren't even fishermen, but they didn't want to break up the group. They're just kind of hanging around. Hey, remember when this happened? Remember when that happened? Remember the good old days when we were kind of all together and we had focus and purpose, and our best days were when Jesus was here and everything was working out. That was a good 3-year run. Now what do we do? Have you ever been in a situation where your reason for getting up in the morning was gone, was taken away? It's like, now what am I going to do? What's my purpose? What's my focus? Or maybe some other circumstance, and you begin to say, maybe I don't have it. Maybe God missed it with me. Maybe I'm somebody that just doesn't have what it takes to do this. And so Peter says, I'm going fishing. I'm going to just do what I know to do. I'm going to go back to the old times. So see there in verse 3, Peter said, I'm going fishing. Now for Peter to say, I'm going fishing, is different than for some of you that say you're going fishing. Now, for some of you, you go fishing to maybe get out of the house or to get away or to relax, or maybe you like the challenge of trying to catch the biggest one in the lake. There's a lot of different reasons why people would go fishing. But for Peter, he said, I'm going fishing because he said, I'm going to do what I know to do. It's all I know. It's what I grew up doing. It's what I've been around. The 3-year run, it was nice. I don't really know where I'm going from here. I'm going to go back to fishing. And did you see how, the rest of the disciples are like, well, we're going too. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know what's next. So we might as well just hang together here in our aimlessness. And so they go out and, do you remember how successful they were? We read it a moment ago. They caught nothing. So now picture Peter. I used to know how to do this. Now I can't even fish. That which I grew up on, I cut my teeth on. I was mending nets when Jesus got me into this thing, and I can't even catch a fish anymore. And then some guy from the shore starts yelling, "Hey kids, have you caught anything?" And then giving them some advice. Throw your net on the other side. How many of you like it? Let's say you're painting at your house, the wall, the outside of the house, and somebody comes by and says, "Hey, hey, you missed a spot." Yeah, thanks for the advice. I hadn't got there yet. Hey, you missed a spot. You're washing your car. Hey, you missed a spot. You're cleaning the windows. Hey, you missed a spot. Yeah, right there. It's like, I'm still working on it. So they're out on the lake, and some guy yells out to them, "Hey kids, have you got anything?" Now at the end of verse 5, it says, they answered him no. And I was trying to imagine what the no was like for them. Because at this point, they feel like they can't do anything. They were so dependent on Jesus for 3 years, and he's not showing up. He's not coming through for them. So they go back to the old ways and the old times, and now I can't even catch a fish, and some guy on shore is asking me about it. No. I'm sure it was a quiet, meek, maybe the guy, if we say it soft enough, the guy on the shore won't even know we haven't caught anything. And then the guy on the shore says, "Throw your net on the other side." Wow. This story is especially interesting because Jesus creates throwback moments in this story. He's going to constantly remind Peter and the other disciples of the spiritual highlights in their life. One of the things that happens, we get to a point often in our Christian life and circumstances conspire. And so we get kind of discouraged. And why have I done this? And what have I been doing? And why did this happen? And Jesus does a masterful work like he does to throw back to the past. Because when they throw their net on the other side, they have a catch of fish that's so huge, they can hardly gather it in. But this isn't the first time Jesus did a miracle like this. The first time was in Luke chapter 5, and it's when Jesus called Peter to follow him the first time. Jesus borrows a fishing boat to stand in and teach to the people on the shore. And then Jesus gets done teaching and he says, "Okay, Peter, let's launch out into the deep." And Peter's like, "Oh man, we have fished all night and caught nothing. But because you said so, and the carpenter will take some fishing advice from the carpenter." That's really what was going on there. And they launch out and they have a catch of fish so big that Peter thinks the nets are going to break. And he falls on his knees right in the fishing boat and says to Jesus, "My Lord and my God." And then in verse 10 of Luke 5, Jesus says to Simon Peter, "Do not be afraid. From now on, you're going to catch men." And when they had brought their boats to land, they forsook all and followed him. So Jesus calls Peter to follow him. He calls him into ministry, but the calling happens on the fishing boat, reminding Peter, you wouldn't be able to even catch a fish if it wasn't for me. I have bigger plans for you. I have a destiny for you. I have a plan for you. If you get on board and follow, I'm calling you, Peter. So Peter's at the end and he's bobbing like a bottle in the water, wondering what his purpose is. What now? And Jesus says, "Throw your net on the other side." And he begins to gather up some fish. It was a recreation of what had happened 3 years earlier. Wow. 1 week earlier had been the Last Supper. And at the Last Supper, Jesus said this in John chapter 15 and verse 5. "I'm the vine and you are the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. He who abides in me and I in him will bear much fruit. Without me, you can do nothing. What was the lesson to Peter the fisherman who couldn't catch fish without Jesus? Jesus did another throwback to a week before at the Last Supper when he said, Peter, without me, you can do nothing. He wanted Peter to understand that he was utterly, totally, completely dependent on Christ. Even the things that we used to do, it's not like, well, I'll go back and do it in my own abilities. Well, where did I get those abilities? Where did we get business brains? Where did we get business sense? Where did we get the capacity to work with our hands? Jesus let Peter know that with Christ, all things are possible. There's a divine enablement. So there's a caution here I want to pass along. And the caution is this. Don't consider your faith invincible. Don't consider your faith invincible. Don't think, I'm on such a mountaintop, I'll never bail on God. I would never give up. There's nothing that could ever shake me. How many have thought that and then had their faith weakened by circumstances that conspired? How many people have been flying high for God and are like, nothing's going to knock me off this spot. Nothing's going to take me down. I don't see any way this could happen. And it does. And Peter is the one that just a week before had said, I'll never deny you. I could stand strong. I'm with you, Jesus. And the pressure and the circumstances, any one of us are a decision or two away from sin, discouragement, distraction. And it was just a decision or two for Peter that took him from a spiritual high of seeing the resurrection out to throwing rocks along the seashore, trying to figure out what he was going to do. Well, let's read on then. Verse 7. Therefore, that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, let me pause there a moment. It says the disciple whom Jesus loved. John, the disciple, never calls himself by name in the book of John. He always calls himself the disciple whom Jesus loved. Disciple, just a fascinating turn of phrase there. So John recognizes and he says to Peter, it's the Lord. Now, when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. Then the other disciples came in the little boat, for they were not far from land, but about 200 cubits. A cubit was about 18 inches. They measured elbow to fingertip, 300 feet from shore, dragging the net with the fish. Then as soon as they had come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and the fish laid on it, and bread. And Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish which you have caught. Simon Peter went up and dragged the net to land full of large fish, 153. I was always been curious who counted the fish and why would they have counted the fish? Would fishermen who were businessmen have been thinking every fish, I'm the denarii are past dollar signs in their eyes? I don't know. Although there were many, the net wasn't broken. And Jesus said to them, come and eat breakfast. Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? Knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus showed himself to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. The second quote of significance here, the first one was, Peter, I'm going fishing. I'm aimless. I'm not sure what to do. The second one is Jesus saying, come and eat. I want us to understand how Jesus treated the aimless, discouraged disciples. I invite you to come and eat. I'm inviting you to come join me for a meal. He doesn't yell at them for you bunch of weak guys. Look at your faith is no good. Get out of my sight. He doesn't say, shame on you for bailing on me and dropping the ball like that. No. What he says is, Come join me. So there's a few throwbacks that occur here. For example, did anybody think that was Peter's first time to jump out of a boat and go toward Jesus? He'd done that before too. This was his second time to jump out of a boat, but he probably had to swim this time. It doesn't mention anything about walking on the water. Another throwback that was here, and when Jesus originally called the disciples, he had said, I want you to come and be with me. And then I'm going to send you out to preach. It was a fascinating call to relationship. And that's what this come and eat is Jesus saying, I want to renew and restore the relationship that we had. And Jesus says that to you. You're not too far gone. And so in Mark chapter 3 and verse 14, that's where we're at the beginning of Jesus' ministry with those men. And he calls them to him to come and be with him. There's another throwback. How about Jesus having bread and fish for the disciples? Does that sound familiar to a story from Jesus' ministry? Yeah, when he fed the 5,000, he passed out bread and fish to them. And I was also fascinated in verse 13. See if this phrase sounds familiar. Jesus then came and took the bread and gave it to them. What's that sound like? The Last Supper, communion. Do you know that had only been like a week before? So imagine the scene as they're on the receiving end of Jesus handing them bread. Jesus is creating all these throwback moments to remind Peter that his best times are when he was walking with God. When I talk to people that get discouraged and circumstances have conspired and they get distracted and discouraged in their faith and they're kind of away from church and away from God, when I get to talk to them in their honest moments, what they'll admit is their best times were when they were walking with God. Their best times as an individual, their best times as a family were when they were walking with God and in church and engaged as a family in what was going on with the Lord. And Jesus is recreating these different scenes so that he can remind Peter, remember those times. Your best times, Peter, were when you were following me. Those were the best times. And Jesus is saying, God provided for you, Peter. God had a calling for you. He had a purpose for you. God didn't intend for you to bob on the water endlessly for decades. God has a plan and a purpose for you. He has promises that he's sending your way. You're not too far gone. You haven't been away too long. You haven't messed up too badly. God's inviting you to come to him. Your best days are going to be when you're walking with God. And he longs to meet with you, and he's got the provisions. So open your heart to him. In Revelation chapter 3 and verse 20, it's a plea from God. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. And if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him. When Jesus said, come and eat, he said, I'm inviting you to a relationship with me. He doesn't slam him for getting discouraged. He doesn't pile on. You should be shaping up us. Be ashamed of yourself, Peter. No, come and eat. When we look forward to the last days, in fact, God describes heaven and a great event in heaven as the marriage supper of the Lamb. It's in Revelation 19 and verse 9. It refers to the marriage supper of the Lamb and what a great event it's going to be. We sing a song here now and then, what a beautiful name it is. And there's a phrase in that song. You didn't want heaven without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. God longs for a relationship with you. He hasn't abandoned you. And no matter how far you've turned your back on him or how long it's been, he longs for you to come and eat. Come back into that relationship with him. And so the caution here, don't consider your discouragement final. Don't consider your discouragement final. It's not the end of the story. It's not the last chapter. God is still at work, and he has a purpose for you. You don't need to float aimlessly on the water. Accept his invitation to come back. The story goes on. Jesus is not finished reinforcing to Peter that his best days were when he was walking with God and that there was an opportunity for restoration. Verse 15. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, Feed my lambs. Jesus said to him a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? And he said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, Tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Now, why do you think Jesus asked Peter this question 3 times? What is there in Peter's past? It had only been a week before in which 3 times, the number 3 times came up. He had denied the Lord Jesus 3 times. And so Jesus gave him 3 times the opportunity to affirm his love for Christ. It's a restoration and a renewal again to say, you're not too far gone. It hasn't been too long that you've been away. No matter how long you've drifted aimlessly on the sea of life, it's not too late for you, and it's not been too long. And so Jesus said to him, Do you love me more than these? What was these? Fishing boat, fishing net, fish, your old life. Peter, I've called you to a new life. I have a new purpose. In fact, he gives him the new purpose when he says, Feed my lambs, feed my sheep. I have a job for you, Peter. There's people who need you. Remember his original calling. You're going to fish for men now, Peter. Now, in those 3 questions of Jesus, there's a little bit of fascinating wordplay going on there that I want to talk about. It says there, Jesus asked Peter if he loved him, and Peter said, Yes, Lord, I love you. But in the first century Greek language that the Bible was written in, there were 2 or 3 or 4 different words that were used for the word love. The word agape or agapao is sacrificial love, deep sacrificial love. It's what a husband would long to have for his wife, deep sacrificial love. And it's the word that God uses to describe his love for us. So the first time when Jesus asked the question, he said, Peter, do you love me? It was agapao. Do you have that kind of deep sacrificial love for me? And Peter answered and he said, Lord, I love you. But he did not say, I love you with a deep sacrificial love. The word he used is phileo, Philadelphia, brotherly love. I love you like we're in the family together. I have affection for you. We're pretty good friends. Jesus said, Peter, I'm looking for deep commitment, sacrifice out of you. And Peter said, we're pretty close, you and me. We're pretty good friends. Jesus asked him the second time, do you love me? It was agapao that time. Peter's answer the second time was phileo. Jesus' second question, do you have deep, abiding, sacrificial love for me? And Peter's answer was, I have affection for you, brotherly love, we're pals. The third time Jesus asked the question, he said, Peter, do you phileo me? He lowered the bar, and Peter said, Lord, you know that I have phileo for you. And then what did Jesus say? Feed my sheep. What Jesus was saying was, I will take your imperfect, flawed, broken capacity and I'll make it enough, Peter. You give me what you have and I'll make it enough. How many people have said, I don't really have what it takes, so I'm going to sit on the sidelines, and they don't sit there floating aimlessly out in the drift? How many people have thought, I'm not signing up because I can't do all of that. I can't go all in. I can't be the missionary in Nepal or in Africa or something. And so I'm not even going to get started. And so they continued to drift on the sea. What Jesus said is, give me what you have, and I will take it, and I will enable it, and I will make it enough. And you will see remarkable things done in your life. Give me your less than perfect love, Peter, and I'll make it enough. Feed my sheep with your less than perfect love. God won't want me. I'm too flawed. I'm too messed up. Too many mistakes. That God would use Peter gives any of us hope. That with our weaknesses and our flaws and our limitations, He can use us. A couple more throwbacks before we're done. Notice what name He calls Peter here. He calls him Simon. That was his birth name. That was his original name. And Jesus, in John chapter 1 and verse 42, Jesus changed his name. He said, you're no longer Simon, son of Jonah. I'm going to start calling you Cephas, which means a stone. Cephas was the Aramaic form of Peter, which was the Greek word, Peter meaning stone. Peter, you're something solid and substantive that can be launched out. You're not Simon anymore. You have a new identity, a new calling, a new purpose. I have a plan for you. So when He calls him Simon, what would Peter have heard? Oh, He's using my old identity when I was kind of aimless and didn't have a purpose and I was adrift in the sea. And He says, Simon, I still have a job for you. Simon, I'm not finished with you. So here would be the warning here. Don't consider your gifts insignificant. Don't consider your gifts insignificant. How often? I'm too messed up. I don't really have what it takes. I don't have this in me. I'm flawed. I've made mistakes. It's been too long. I've been away too long. What's God got in store for me? I don't have. And if we give God who we are with our weaknesses and our flaws and our shortcomings and our mistakes, He says, I'll make it enough. Yeah, but you don't know my baggage. God says, I'll make it enough. You don't know my history. God says, I'll make it enough. There's a P.S. to the story here. Verse 18. Peter probably could have done without this. Jesus said, most assuredly I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. Peter, you're going to die a violent death because you're going to follow me. And so verse 19, Jesus spoke, signifying by what death He would glorify God. And when Jesus had spoken this, He said to him, follow me. Would the words follow me have meant anything to Peter? 3 years earlier, Jesus came and found a guy mending his fishing nets. And He said, follow me. And then that guy, over the course of time, got a little discouraged, lost his focus, throwing rocks into the water, thinking, I might as well just go back to what I know, the old me, because that's kind of who I am, and I'm not really getting this figured out. And Jesus started calling back all these events from Peter's life. He passed out bread and fish, and He created a scene where a miracle of fish were captured. And He created circumstances so that Peter would jump out of the boat and head toward shore. And He brought the number 3 times to his mind so that 3 times he could affirm. Then He said, follow me. So I don't know how long, if you look back and you say, man, I've been adrift. That's been me bobbing up and down. I don't know if it's been months or years or decades for you. But in God's eyes and in God's hands, it doesn't really matter. Because God's capacity to restore and renew is for anyone. And he invites everyone here, come and dine, come and eat, come back into relationship, come back into fellowship with me. Don't drift any longer. Don't wander anymore. I have a plan for you. I have a purpose for you. I have people that need your influence. Feed my sheep, people that need your role in their lives. I'm looking for you, he says. Would you bow your heads with me, please? With heads bowed and eyes closed, I'm going to give you a moment to have a conversation with God. And it's possible that you would say, God, I've been adrift. I've been that bottle bobbing in the water, unsure of my next move, uncertain of what I needed to do. I've been discouraged, distracted. I've pulled away. It might have been a couple days, a few months, maybe it was a decade. But today you want to come back to God and take him up on his offer for a renewed relationship. How about from your heart to God's? God, I want to renew this relationship. I want to restore this. I want to come back. I don't want to let that happen again. Now, there might be some here that would say, I would never let that happen. That would never happen to me. I've come too far. I'm too strong in my faith. How about a prayer from your heart to God? To say, God, I don't want that to happen. I want to do everything I can to maintain that relationship with you. I don't want to drift. I don't want to wander. I don't want to float. I want to live with purpose, focus. Your plan for my life. Let's stand, please, for closing prayer. Heavenly Father, across this room, there's numbers of us who have sensed drift. We've been just floating through life and through the culture. There's many here today, God, who are seeking you for a renewal of their faith, a restoration of their heart with you. Thank you that you invite us to come and eat. You don't shame us. You don't beat us down. You invite us in. You invite us back in. Thank you for the persistent knocking. Thank you for creating circumstances that remind us of our best times of when we were walking with you. And God, would you create that renewal dozens of more times in lives? And God, if there's anyone here who thinks they're at a point spiritually that they're so strong they'll not ever fail, may they be knocked down from their pride and then just renew their desire and commitment to do the things that brought them to strength. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.